there is nothing more alien, monstrous, and ultimately terrifying than sexual sadism. Even when the partner is submissive and consenting, enthusiastically consenting and initiating, and a willing participant, even then, there's something in sexual sadism that excludes it from the remit of humanity, renders it inhuman in many respects. And I think one of the issues is that sexual sadists are autosexual, autoerotic. They're attracted to themselves. They regard themselves as the sole, exclusive, erotic sexual object. Many of them are sometimes asexual. At any rate, sexual sadists are not attracted to or sexually aroused by the partner, regardless of the sex of the partner. They use the partner's body to masturbate with, the partner's submission, the partner's willing participation in her own defilement and degradation, the partner's voluntary remission, self-negation. All these enhance the sexual sadist's sense of perceived irresistibility. The sexual sadist feels sexy, he feels attractive, he feels irresistible, and then he redirects this arousal, this sexual energy at himself as the exclusive recipient and sexual object of his attentions. And so it's a solipsistic endeavor. The sexual sadist is always alone in his exploits and in the bedroom. And his sole purpose is pantomime, a kabuki theater, a kind of performative act where the partner, so if we can call the other person a partner, where the collaborator simply affirms and buttresses the sexual sadist's perception of himself as the ultimate, drop-dead gorgeous, irresistible, sexy object. And then what ensues is essentially masturbation. Sexual sadists degrade and defile. A very small minority of them are violent, and very, very few of them are non-consensual. They use the partner's consent, expressed, enthusiastic, clear, repeated, fantastic. They use fantasies as well in order to reaffirm and support the self-perception and self-image. And so it is a collusion, a collaboration that is extremely mentally ill and pathologized. This is not BDSM. This is not BDSM. BDSM is ritualized, it's rigid, it's structured, all the parties have roles, and so on and so forth. The sexual sadist uses his intimate partner as raw material, as something to be processed, as input to be digested, consumed, and then spat out when no longer necessary, when climax had arrived. The vast majority of sexual sadists, as you've understood by now, as you've gathered by now, are men. And of course, vast majority of these are heterosexuals, although the use of the word heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual is wrong in this context. The sexual sadist has only one partner, himself, or in rare occasions, herself. Stay with me to watch an interview I granted to Tawfick, the British journalist. But first, a few words of introduction to the interview. You're about to watch the first part of my interview with the British journalist Tawfick. You can watch the second part by clicking on the link in the description. The interview with Tawfick is very unsettling It touches upon very controversial topics in a way which you may disagree with, but it is founded on the recent bleeding edge, cutting edge research on psychopaths and narcissists. And so I would like to emphasize one theme in the interview with her, and that is the issue of overcoming resistance. The narcissist and the psychopath, they're defiant, they're contumacious, they reject authority, they're reckless, they're in your face, they're a law unto themselves. They don't obey laws, regulations, mores, and norms, societal or otherwise. Because they're like that, they assume that everyone is like that. This is a psychological defense mechanism known as projection. So narcissists and psychopaths assume that everybody is defiant, everybody is aggressive, everybody hates authority, everybody is in your face, everybody has no boundaries when it comes to externalizing aggression. There's a hidden assumption that all people are prone, in other words, to resistance. And resistance is the core construct with which the narcissist and the psychopath make sense of other people. The resistance is the key feature of the narcissist and psychopath's mentalization or theory of mind. Consequently, the ruling motto in the narcissist and psychopath's world is resistance is futile. By overcoming other people's resistance, by securing, for example, the consent of other people, or the cooperation of other people, or the submission of other people, the narcissists and psychopaths feel elevated. It's proof of irresistibility and godlike power. When you overcome someone's resistance, you conquer them. They're yours. They're your property. They belong to you. They're your extension. You own them. And so resistance has many forms, and overcoming resistance is multifarious in the narcissistic and psychopathic pathology. Penetrating the mind of another person is a form of overcoming resistance, gaining eerily accurate insight as to what makes people tick. That's a form of overcoming their defenses, their firewall, their boundaries, and their resistance. Modifying someone's behavior is a form of overcoming resistance. Changing someone's values or beliefs is another way to overcome their resistance. Altering, changing someone's relationships with others is a form of overcoming resistance. The target, the victim, the mark, the partner, the insignificant other, they're all there to be overcome, conquered, consumed, invaded, subsumed, digested. Overcoming resistance, therefore, is the main effect, or at least generates the main effect in the narcissistic and psychopathic pathology. And the narcissist and psychopath's relationship with other people, including the sexual dimension of their relationship, is therefore about overcoming resistance, rendering the other party consensually submissive, subjugated, dominating the other party. And this is the topic of the first part of my interview with Eve Tawfick. Here we are. Hello, Eve. Good to see you again. Long time no see.
Yep, long time. I've missed you, although I have kept up to date with your latest work, as always. So it's always interesting.
My condolences and apologies. Yeah.
It's very, before bed, listening to your voice is very soothing.
Many people tell me that they fall asleep to my voice, which I consider to be a major narcissistic injury. But yeah, I acknowledge the phenomenon.
You should, you know how they have the lamps that help people sleep?
Right.
You have the option of rainfall, jungle sounds. I think you would make a nice addition to that.
Yes, I'm very incandescent. Yeah, that's very true. I'm very
Yeah.
lamp-like.
So today, for those who don't know me, I'm journalist Eve Tawfick. I'm based in the UK, and I'm here to talk to the expert Dr. Sam Vaknin about psychopathy, not so much narcissism today, although I'm sure, you know, the topic of narcissism will naturally find its way into the discussion. How are you, Sam? How are you doing?
Well, since we're about to discuss psychopathy, I'm elated. Nothing short of elated.
I'm glad to hear it. So just quickly, just a rundown. In terms of psychopathy and relationships, what would you say is the stark difference between that and narcissistic relationships? If you could pinpoint, you know, that if you were to put the two into a column, which would be, you know, the tell, as it were?
Well, I'm a big fan of science fiction, and we would be discussing right now pure psychopaths and pure narcissists, which are, of course, non-existent. These are ideal types. There is there's comorbidity, very frequent comorbidity between narcissists and psychopaths. In other words, many psychopaths are also diagnosed with narcissism, and many narcissists are diagnosed with psychopathy, although not all psychopaths are narcissists. There's a common mistake on that. Still, most psychopaths are grandiose. So we could generalize and say that things that apply to narcissists sometimes apply to psychopaths and vice versa. And there's a whole class of people known as malignant narcissists. There's a combination, a delectable combination of narcissists, psychopath, and sadist. And of course, everything we will be discussing applies to them as well. However, should we be unfortunate enough to come across the ideal types, then these are the differences. The psychopath has no need for fantasy. Psychopath is grounded in reality. He has an intact reality testing. While the narcissist, his reality testing is shattered. And when I say his, her, half of all narcissists are women. So in the case of narcissism, reality testing is shattered. The narcissist self-gaslights in a way. And so the narcissist needs to be embedded in order to relate to other people, in order to possess something called object relations. And the narcissist needs to concoct a fantasy and then to introduce you into the fantasy as a participant in a kind of unfolding, unfurling on-the-fly script. And so this is the first difference. Shared fantasy in the case of narcissism, no fantasy in the case of psychopaths. The second thing is that the narcissist is autoerotic. In other words, the narcissist's exclusive sexual object is himself. Narcissists are unable to relate to other people sexually or psychosexually. Whereas the psychopath is, again, healthier in this sense. The psychopath has a sex drive. The problem with the psychopath is that the psychopath's sex drive is coupled with power, with the addiction or the hunger for power. So very often the psychopath's sexuality devolves into some kind of sadism. Yeah.
Sorry, that's just made me think, if you were to look in circles of people who have extreme BDSM fantasies or indeed rape fantasies or along those lines, you know, there's certain levels to this. There's a hierarchy. You know, it starts off with your sort of commonplace, almost garden variety, 50 Shades of Grey, BDSM, sort of whips and chains and what have you. And then you've got, you know, the humiliation, drowning, and you know, rape fantasies. In those circles, would you say you're more likely to find somebody who is psychopathic or has psychopathic tendencies? Are those the kind of power plays during sex that you're referring to, or
No.
is it deeper than that?
No, BDSM is, in the vast majority of cases, highly consensual. Actually, the submissive part, the dyad or the group, the submissives actually control the action, and there are many safety guards built in to the process, and it's highly negotiated. It's a compromise, represents compromises, and psychopaths are incapable of any of this. Psychopaths are addicted to power and control and domination, which are unmitigated by anyone else's involvement. Or, in other words, psychopaths do seek consensus, and they do seek consent, and they do seek enthusiastic submission, and so on and so forth. But this is for the purpose of self-aggrandizement. It's not because they see the other person as an equal. It's not because they think everything has to be agreed upon, and so on. It's because if you are enthusiastically consenting, it means that the psychopath is irresistible. It's a confirmation of irresistibility. Your enthusiasm, your participation, your initiative, your involvement, your inability to extricate yourself, your addiction to the sex, and so on and so forth, however degrading, however humiliating, however painful, is an indication, proof positive of the psychopath's irresistibility. So the psychopath would act consensually, actually, but it's not the same type of consent as in BDSM. In BDSM, there's a recognition of equality, a recognition of mutual bargaining, and so on. Not so with the psychopath.
And there's
yeah.
Sorry, carry on. Sorry.
The psychopath craves your submission as proof of his virility, if he's a man, femininity, if he's a woman, if she's a woman, and definitely irresistibility. So that's part of the grandiosity of the psychopath.
So in terms of with BDSM and consent, and there's a suggestion that people who gravitate towards these fetishes, there may be some, I think it's quite an old-fashioned concept, that people who gravitate towards these kind of violent sexual acts have an issue within themselves. Would that be a separate issue then? Definitely.
The professional consensus is that BDSM is aptly named. It involves sadism and masochism. Manifestations or expressions of sadism and masochism, which are highly ritualized, highly consensual. And in this sense, they are performance art. And indeed, in a lot of BDSM, there's no penetration, there's no ejaculation even, no orgasm, no. It's about the theater performance. It's a theater. And so it's an enactment of internal masochism or sadism. And anyone who's been in the BDSM scene knows that sometimes you're sub and sometimes you're dom. Sometimes you're submissive, sometimes you're dominant. The roles are not cast in stone. It's not like if you're dominant forever. You are sometimes likely to come across a partner who would render you submissive. So masochism and sadism are flip sides of the same coin, but it's the same coin. And anyone who is sadistic is likely also to be masochistic, and vice versa. The difference is how do you externalize your sadistic tendencies? So normal people, healthy people, and people who engage in BDSM are healthy. This has been the consensus of the DSM-5 committee. So normal, healthy people engage in the externalization of sadism and masochism by finding other people who would like to do the same and have fun.
Yeah.
Psychopaths externalize the sadism, and by the way, masochism, but mostly sadism, by kind of feeding off your enthusiastic consent and submission.
Okay. So
they do find partners who are consensual, partners who are enthusiastic, partners who are submissive, partners who are highly masochistic, and they feed off this energy. It elevates them. This is known as narcissistic elation. It gives them a kind of high or euphoria. And that's the difference.
So with a psychopath, say I'm unknowingly in a relationship with a psychopathic man, his you know, my enjoyment of the sex to a certain level would spur him on. It would, you know, as usual, when you have consensual sex with someone you're in a relationship with, obviously enjoying it is a huge part of it, and it becomes, you know, mutually enjoying it as well. But if it's someone who is a psychopath, they're enjoying that in a different way, not the healthy way that most people do. It's more, it's a so they feel omnipotent and as if they're in complete control of the situation, and you're in a way submitting without knowing it. Does that make sense?
Well, to start with, the partner's enjoyment is a turn on as far as healthy people go.
Yeah, exactly.
It is also a turn on with a psychopath, but not because he cares about your well-being or enjoyment or whatever, but because it's proof of his capacity to perform, of his superiority as a performer.
Yeah.
So a psychopath is likely to be very concerned with the question: is he the best you've ever had, or how many times have you orgasmed? It's like the psychopath keeps statistics of the sex and constantly the bottom line. It's a bottom line approach. And did I max the profits or whatever? So your enjoyment is proxy for his ability to induce in you enjoyment. So it is his power over you, that he has the power to alter your mood or to alter your bodily reactions. This power gives the psychopath, his moment of euphoria and elation and so on. Not your enjoyment, but what your enjoyment proves to him. Now, your submissiveness and your enthusiastic consent and even your initiative, psychopaths are open to the partner initiating. They all have to revolve around your degradation and humiliation. So it's not normal submissiveness. In BDSM, the sub or the submissive partner ritualizes. It's a kind of ceremony. There's no real humiliation or real. It's all kind of a performance art, as I said. But the narcissist and the psychopath, especially the psychopath, insist on actual degradation and humiliation. So a psychopath, for example, is likely to push you to engage in group sex because he wants to reduce you to being a slut. He wants you to breach your own boundaries and morals, and then feel bad about it and feel ashamed and guilty. A psychopath is likely to, I don't know, physically act in ways which kind of symbolize your annihilation and objectification.
Okay.
They treat you as an object. So there's a lot of degradation and humiliation built into the psychopathic sex act.
Wow. I mean, so if you were to react in a way that, say, if I wasn't enjoying sex with a psychopath, or I didn't react, or I didn't show enthusiasm, how would that then play out with him or her? How would this then unfold in the bedroom, or if it happened over a long period of time or something like that? What would their reaction be? Would they then become violent in other manners, or seek to see that control in other areas instead, or escalate it? How would that happen?
Well, here there's a major difference between narcissists and even psychopathic narcissists and a pure psychopath. A narcissist or a psychopathic narcissist, with the first sign of resistance, first sign of lack of enjoyment, first sign of disillusionment, and so on, a narcissist would immediately stop having sex. And so would a psychopathic narcissist. Because, as I said, narcissists regard sex as the affirmation of their own irresistibility. And they need to feel irresistible in order to feel that they are sexy. And they need to feel sexy because they make love to themselves. When the narcissist is with you and you find the narcissist attractive, the narcissist is flattered, but not for the reasons that you think. When you find the narcissist attractive, it allows the narcissist to find himself attractive and then to have sex with himself. The narcissist needs external confirmation that he is attractive, that he is irresistible, to allow him to find himself attractive and irresistible. This is the concept of narcissistic supply. The narcissist's sense of self-worth, self-perception, self-image, self-appraisal, self-evaluation, all ego functions, all self-related functions, they come from the outside. So now the narcissist is horny and he wants to have sex. There's only one qualified partner, the narcissist himself, because the narcissist is autoerotic. But then the narcissist says, am I truly attractive? Am I truly sexy? Am I truly irresistible? Am I a worthy sexual partner to myself? And so he resorts to you, to your judgment, to the way you see him. He sees himself through your gaze, through your eyes. And if you do find him attractive and irresistible, so does he. And then he can have sex with himself through you. He can use your body to masturbate with.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking as you were saying it. I was like, so you essentially become a tube.
A dildo.
Yeah,
an animated
something
dildo,
just...
animated sex doll. Yeah, absolutely. Narcissists have sex only with themselves. This is called autoerotism. It's a well-documented phenomenon. They're incapable of perceiving external objects. So they cannot have sex with another person because in their distorted minds, there's no such thing as another person. No one exists outside the narcissist's mind.
This is very, it brings to mind the very, you know, probably you've heard this 1,000 times, the very stereotypical scene in American Psycho where he's having sex with a woman and looking at himself in the mirror while he does it. I mean,
and narcissists is very common, for example, masturbate during the sex act. Actually, the vast majority of narcissists come or orgasm owing to masturbation, not to the actual penetration on any other sex. They end up masturbating.
What, during, like at the end, or just
at
any
end,
point?
At the end, they have sex with you, this, that. They lose erection very frequently. Erectile dysfunction is very common among narcissists. And then they withdraw from you aside and they masturbate and then they orgasm. They're having finally sex with themselves, you know. It's different with the psychopath because you asked me about the psychopath. And as usual, I ignored your question and I answered mine.
No, it's all fascinating. No worries.
No, I'm kidding. I want to sustain my narcissist credentials. So,
of course,
that's very different with the psychopath because the psychopath is in it for the power. It's a power play. Psychopaths are more likely to rape than narcissists, for example. Psychopaths are really focused on power. Your attraction to the psychopath gives the psychopath power over you. And he's turned on sexually by the fact that he has acquired power over you, not by the fact that you're sexy or you're attracted to him. You're irrelevant. It's just your proof, walking, talking proof that he has power, that he's powerful. And so if you negate this, if you were to refuse, if you were to, cut it off in the middle, if you were to criticize his performance or whatever, if you were to demonstrate independence, personal autonomy, agency, that challenges the psychopath, reduces his enjoyment or eliminates it altogether because it's about power and it's not about you. And then, yes, some psychopaths, although not the majority, but a small minority, could become violent. Definitely could become violent. And this would end up in a sexual assault or rape or something similar. However, it is much less common than people say or think. There's a lot of stereotyping going on.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to ask you. There seems to be this, the psychopath in a suit, and then you've got the, prison inmates who are savages and serial killers. You've got this, and it seems there's very little in between. They're either this genius CEO who's ruining the world via the economy, or you've got some sadistic killer.
Yeah. And the overwhelming vast majority of psychopaths are run-of-the-mill, next-door neighbor types, and pillars of the community very often, and so on and so forth. Psychopaths are goal-oriented. The narcissist's only goal, period, is narcissistic supply. Narcissists couldn't care less about money or power or sex. Narcissists make money because being rich garners narcissistic supply. When you are rich, people notice you. So it's a way to obtain supply. Narcissists get elected to public office because then the media covers them, and so they get supply. It's all about supply. Sex is also about supply with the narcissist. The narcissist needs to feel irresistible, super attractive, unprecedented in terms of performance, because it's part of his grandiose, inflated, fantastic self-image. And your role is to uphold and buttress this self-image. Sadism, which is much more common among psychopaths, has nothing to do with any of this. The overwhelming vast majority of narcissists are not sadists. Narcissists will never coerce you to have sex with him. Never. Because that means that he is repulsive.
As injury, you're giving that narcissistic injury.
If I need to coerce you to have sex with me, it means I'm not attractive. It means I'm not irresistible. A narcissist would never rape, never coerce you to have sex. A narcissist needs you to melt. A narcissist needs you to lose control over yourself. A narcissist needs you to go wild. A narcissist needs you to, wow, he needs this show of irresistibility.
That's really interesting. Yeah. If you hadn't have said that just now, I would never have guessed that a narcissist wouldn't, they wouldn't coerce you or attempt to persuade you in some way, or
psychopaths would. Sadistic psychopaths would, which is a fraction, and not a very big fraction, of psychopaths. So people take the most extreme outlier cases and they generalize, like serial killers. How many serial killers are there? A few hundreds. How many psychopaths are there? A few tens of millions. So, we tend to generalize from a non-representative, self-selecting group, because because you choose to be a serial killer. It's a self-selection. It's a non-representative sample. Psychopaths may end up raping or being coercive, especially when rejected, especially when humiliated while being rejected. But this would only be a subspecies or subgroup of psychopaths known as sadistic psychopaths or sexual sadists. That's the common term. So there are very few. These are very few. Psychopaths are goal-oriented, I started to say. They're goal-oriented. The narcissist's goal is narcissistic supply, so you need to demonstrate to the narcissist that he is the one and only. The psychopath's goal is power. Psychopaths are obsessed with power. So you need to demonstrate to the psychopath that he has power over you. For example, chasing you and conquering you. That's power. So psychopaths are very much into chasing and conquering, sexual conquest. Narcissists are not. A narcissist would feel humiliated if he were compelled to chase you and to conquer you, because this means he is not automatically, instantaneously irresistible. If you ask the narcissist to invest some effort in flirting with you, in courting you, in going after you, in conquering you, in convincing you, in cajoling you, this is narcissistic injury. It's inconceivable to the narcissist that he has to invest any effort whatsoever in obtaining anything. This is known as entitlement. The narcissist thinks that the minute you see him, mission accomplished. He is so drop-dead gorgeous and profoundly irresistible that he doesn't need to work hard to get you. So
he is the most handsome.
He's the most handsome.
He's the man that walks into a room and because I know a couple of men like this. Not going to name names on here. You have a lot of followers. I know a few men who will say, "Oh, I walk down the street and such, all the women are looking at me, or I'm the most handsome, or I go into a restaurant and." yeah, other people's wives are looking at me actually as well, and they're not necessarily unattractive males. It's just I don't really see. I personally don't go around my day and notice these kinds of things to such an extent, and then not only notice them, but to tell everybody as the story as well. That's a very to me, it's quite
narcissistic thing
funny.
to do. It's
Yeah,
a very
I
narcissistic
guess.
thing to do. So this is a very critical distinction between narcissist and psychopath. A psychopath cherishes the chase and the conquest because it's proof positive of his power to convert you. You didn't want him or something, and then he made you. He forced you in a positive way. He brought you to his point of view. He made you see him, and then he became irresistible to you. So a psychopath would court, would flirt, would chase, would romance you, and so on and so forth, but not because you're special or you are, but because he needs to convert you to the cause. He needs, it's a missionary thing. And then having done that, that proves his power. Then the psychopath would say, no woman, I haven't met a woman who said no to me. And a narcissist would find this highly humiliating. I need to flirt with you. I need to court you. Don't you see how superior, supreme, gorgeous, amazing, hyper-intelligent, incredible thing I am? I mean, why do I need to convince you of that? So that proves you are stupid. And so you're not worthy of my attention. So the narcissist, when rejected, does not coerce. He devalues. When the narcissist is rejected, the narcissist devalues. He said, okay, forget her. She's evidently too stupid to realize the treasure that I am, the gift to humanity that I am. A psychopath would become frustrated because the power play has failed. And frustration, we know, leads to aggression. That's the frustration-aggression hypothesis. So all psychopaths are likely to become aggressive, but the overwhelming vast majority would simply be verbally aggressive. Only a tiny, tiny minority would resort to sexual assault and rape and so on. These are very crucial differences, and people keep mixing everything up. They're making a bloody mess of it, you know?
Well, with the abusive love bombing behavior, in that case, are you more likely to see that from a psychopath instead of a narcissist?
What do you mean by abusive love bombing?
Well, I feel like all love bombing is abusive to an extent, but it's the flowers, the chocolates, the chasing, the overcoming objections. I've got a few examples.
That's actually psychopathic behavior. A narcissist, of course, a narcissist would approach you and give you some flowers, secondhand probably. A narcissist would do something. He would do the token things. He would take you out on a date. But this is precisely why a narcissist would offer you marriage on the second date. Because that's it. His investment is over. He took you out on a date. Isn't that enough?
Yeah.
Isn't that enough?
Exactly.
So on the second date, a narcissist would offer you a marriage. On the third date, you should move in with him. And on the fourth date, you're planning how many children you're going to have. And of course, you need to drop your job, your day job. I mean, it's a full-time job to be with a narcissist. So the alacrity of the narcissist, the speed, the incredible speed with which narcissists move, is because within their demented mind, within the shared fantasy, having been exposed to them for 1 hour is enough to convince you that this is the perfect specimen and you should never let go of him. So 1 hour is enough. One date is enough. There's no need for further investment. Anyone who goes after you on a protracted, regular basis, gives you flowers, flirts with you, courts you, takes you out, 1 day, 10 days, 5 days, I don't know, anyone who is persistent in a creepy way, I'm not talking about, healthy people do it too, but anyone who is persistent and the focus is on having power over you somehow, that's a psychopath, not a narcissist. A narcissist would find it extremely humiliating if he has to date you more than 3 times before you have sex and before you consent to become a couple. That's a failure. That's narcissistic injury. That's unthinkable. You must be an idiot for having rejected this incredible offer. So he will devalue you. Narcissist will devalue you.